We understand Tantra is evolving naturally within the consciousness of mankind. Mula Prakriti, the force guiding the progress of evolution, brought mankind to expand our awareness from the mundane to the supernatural. As we previously discussed, the definition of Tantra literally means the liberation of energy trapped in matter to expand the mind. And all of the various practices of Tantra are aimed at fulfilling this objective. The Tantric idea of expansion, triadi, is very important for us to grasp at this stage of the training. The finite human mind functions within certain parameters and is dependent on the organs of the senses for perception. The senses supply information, and then the mind processes it. The field of knowledge available to the brain is thus limited and restricted to the Gyan Indriyas, right? The organs of the senses of perception. However, through meditation, it becomes quite possible to expand the awareness beyond the limitations of the body and mind. This process occurs when the mind is able to withdraw itself from the sensory channels and turn itself within. When you sit for meditation, the mind expands in the sense that it is able to experience things on the inner plane without relying solely on the senses. In Tantra, we must understand that trance and unconsciousness are not meditation. One does not escape reality, but rather we merge totally with it. According to Tantra, both the internal and external dimensions of consciousness are combined during meditation. Sure, in the beginning, we withdraw our senses from the outer world and become aware to the space of consciousness. When you have been able to withdraw your awareness from both the outer senses and the thoughts of the mind, then you should try to combine inner and outer awareness simultaneously. We can say that there are two kinds of awareness, extroverted and introverted. One kind of awareness is through the senses, while the other you could say is psychic, meaning non-physical. When you are oriented towards experiencing the outer world, that is pravritti. But when you are able to reorientate your perception inwards, back towards source, that is called the inner experience, the transcendental experience corresponding to nivritti. So we must ask ourselves, who is experiencing these internal and external planes? It is, of course, that one and the same inner self. The seer is one and not divided into two. This concept of inner oneness is very important in Tantra. There is only one inner self. That's why it is so important that we stop the polarizing battle between good and evil going on between our own ears. Self-condemnation and self-criticism are the signs of a divided consciousness. But whom is condemning who? How many of you are there in there anyway? In fact, there is no division between the material world and the spiritual world. The body even is simply an outer gross expression of that inner self. One revolutionary idea of Tantra is that sex can be spiritual and spirituality can be sexy. Mm-hmm. Some have said that the soul is sexless and genderless. But in Tantra, we more understand that soul is genderful. All genders, all sexes, it is complete and whole. Tantra refrains from self-denial and encourages to embrace yourself and then all that you truly are, fully. Therefore, we can say that the external experience is the gross spiritual experience, and the inner experience is the subtle spiritual experience. The right wing is inner experience, and the left wing is outer experience. If you only have one wing, you cannot soar to great heights. You need both to be a whole being and to reach your fullest potential. In this way, Tantra encourages you to continue to allow your awareness to expand, to incorporate and integrate the inner and the outer, the high and the low, thus bringing heaven to earth. There is often the mistake in thinking that during the experience of meditative absorption, the external experience is completely negated. However, this is not the case. During tantric meditation, both the internal and the external experience are experienced simultaneously within the space of consciousness, because you are the drashta, the inner seer beyond both, to use some of our vernacular from yoga and Samkhya. You are able to hold both inner and outer experience within your awareness at the same time. This is known as the expansion of consciousness. However, this phrase, as popular as it is, the expansion of consciousness, especially popularized by such incredibly important thinkers as Timothy Leary and the psychedelic movement, it's a bit of a misnomer, because the consciousness does not actually expand. It is already fully expanded. It is the awareness that must expand into the space of consciousness. In Samkhya, we have heard about the two causal realities of Purusha and Prakriti. In yoga, we have Atman and Paramatman. In Vedanta, it is Brahman and Maya. Tantra describes these two eternal realities as Shiva and Shakti. Shiva is consciousness and Shakti is the creatrix of energy and matter. When the union between cosmic consciousness and energy takes place, the creative energy of Kundalini begins to descend as originating as a spark of divinity. She creates the individuated state of the individual being and comes to dwell at a dormant state at the base of the spine as the coiled one, responsible for still maintaining the creative energy in each and every form of life. On the cosmic level, this is what happens when these two polarities unite. When the union between consciousness and energy then takes place on the individual level, the microcosmic level, that dormant energy is again awakened and begins her ascent back to source in a process of involution, nivritti. Therefore, the material is rooted in the spiritual. There is no true polarity between the two. It is only a matter of perspective. The tantric must combine spiritual life with material, spiritualizing their sex, spiritualizing their relationships, and spiritualizing their entire life. In this way, the evolution of the soul is greatly accelerated. So long as we dichotomize spiritual life from the body, the senses, and the material world, we are only cutting ourselves off from the bliss of higher awareness. We evolve through each form of life until we have mastered the flow of energy through that nervous system, at which point we graduate up to a slightly more advanced nervous system in which the intelligence of our soul must again learn how to direct the energy of consciousness. In this way, we have been born through 64 lakh, 6.4 million yonis, or wombs, before finally taking birth in this human form and having the opportunity to reunite with Brahman. Tantra empowers you to embrace the wholeness of life while embodied in the form of your current incarnation. Tantra reunites body and mind. And this is the future direction of spiritual life in modern society. This has been the direction for some time. In this modern era of Kali Yuga, we've been told that Tantra is the preferred method of spiritual practice. In previous yugas, people could just read the Vedas, and that was enough for them to become enlightened. In this yuga, yeah, not for me. In this yuga, we have Tantra. The world is thirsty for Tantra today. Puritanical standards are less prevalent today than they were even 50 years ago, but many people still follow the example from previous generations and suppress their sexuality, resulting in inevitable perversions, mental disorders, and harmful social behaviors. If you build a seawall and try to hold back the ocean, it is only a matter of time before every stone is obliterated and turned to sand. Likewise, if we try to suppress human nature, Prakriti will win. The result of suppression is the distortion of energy. You don't block it, you only distort it, which corresponds to perversions on the mental plane. Perversions on the mental plane correspond to distorted energy. And a lot of times it is distorted sexual energy, the energy on the lower chakras. Therefore, in order to master the flow of Shiva Shakti in this current stage of evolution in a human form, we must work towards oneness, wholeness, and total self-integration. In Tantra, sexual life is considered very important for spiritual growth. Tantra does not ask you to renounce your desires, your family, and the world. After all, what truly can be renounced? In Tantra, we only must renounce the fully extroverted orientation towards desire. And even then, not fully. Rather than thinking in terms of renunciation, Tantra helps you to think in terms of integration. According to the ancient spiritual science of Tantra, the sex drive is one of mankind's most powerful urges, and no one is able to subdue it. It is at the root level of our body, mind, and psyche. The sex drive is expressed in our mental and physical behavior. And rather than suppressing it, which only leads to abnormal psychotic behavior, the Tantric integrates it into a holistic expression of life. The sex drive is always there. You can't get rid of it. Whether if you are a devoted yogi or a devoted bogi, a devoted sinner. But you can embrace it, harmonize it, and redirect it inwards towards enriching your spiritual appreciation of life, or your living appreciation of spirit. For centuries, it has been taught that sexual pleasure is bad, it is dirty and perverted, so you must give it up. But Tantra tells you it is perfect. There is nothing more natural than sex. And for spiritual life, it is critical that we stop fighting the dragon and learn to ride and soar with it to greatest heights. For those of us interested in spirituality, Tantra has great news. Finally, some good news. You don't have to give up sex. You have to learn to take it to greater heights. However, there is one fundamental difference. In Tantra, there is the introversion of desire. Most people use sex for either progeny or pleasure. There's 3 uses for sex: progeny, pleasure, but the Tantric knows a third, higher purpose of sexual life, which is for samadhi, for meditative absorption, and for ultimate union with God. Tantra allows us to turn obstacles into stepping stones. in order to continue making steady progress in spiritual life. Our efforts must not create further conflicts in our psyche, nor our external life. Rather, our efforts should clear up all the existing conflicts and remove all obstacles. For this to occur, however, there must be a certain commitment to cultivating awareness all the time, during spiritual practices as well as during daily life. Tantra is a lifestyle, not just a set of practices and techniques. In order to cultivate awareness, you don't need to do very much intellectually. You only must remain ardent and resolute in your commitment to remain aware. To turn your awareness back on yourself again and again and again. Tantra spread around Asia, and actually much further than that. Tantra was at one time even in Egypt and Europe. It spread around the second half of the first millennium in Asia during a time of great religious exclusion. At that time, spirituality was only for a select group of men born from a certain caste who performed all the rituals and all the rites for everyone else. However, Tantra made spirituality available to everyone, regardless of caste or gender. It spread all around Asia in the second half of the first millennium, like democracy has spread in recent centuries. Just as democracy brought governance into the hands of the common person, the people, Tantra brought spirituality into the hands of the common person. Tantra includes everyone, whether young or old. It is for all. Tantra does not ask you to force the mind to become one-pointed, which presupposes years of monastic training, but however asks each practitioner to work with their mind, to work with the forces of nature to bring about the same results as a natural result. Therefore, Tantra is not only for those who have control over themselves, but is also for those who are impulsive, undisciplined, or have terribly restless minds. Tantra asks for you to start with where you are at today. You don't have to try to pretend to be something you're not. You don't have to try to take a vow or impose unnatural rules upon yourself. You start from where you are at. All the obstacles become stepping stones on the path of Tantra for those who want spiritual illumination. You don't have to try to repress or eliminate anything. You only have to learn how to catch hold of them and take that energy higher. Go beyond the gross form. Fundamental energy behind all emotions is the same. Even anger can be transmuted into love and spiritual bliss. All these obstacles become stepping stones. The practice of transmutation of energy is so simple, yet few ever understand it. Once you grasp this science, the inner struggle is finished. You don't have to do battle with yourself anymore. Anything you are feeling can be used as a means for approaching the divine, especially the intense drive of sexuality. In addition to practicing higher awareness all the time, you should also get in the habit of being able to switch off your mind without any effort. A daily meditation practice will empower you to be able to do this in less than half a year. You must make your mind your friend and integrate all the various aspects of your human nature into a unified, homogeneous relationship with yourself. Then wherever you go is pilgrimage. Whatever you say is mantra. Your every thought is sankalpa. Your every movement is mudra. When you lie down, you are doing prostrations. When you eat, you are giving offerings. When you dress yourself, it is doing puja. Sex is meditation. Orgasm is samadhi. And you live in an unbroken awareness of union with the divine. And this does happen, and it will happen for each of you. Kachari Mudra. We are learning today about Kachari Mudra and Ujjayi Pranayama, which will amplify your sensitivity to the prana being directed within the subtle body during Mahamudra. So remember, we have the three treasures: Ojas, Prana, and Tejas. Prana is the active component. You are drawing the prana from the Ojas and pulling it upwards, and the result is Tejas. So the practice involves moving prana. Mahamudra is extracting prana from Ojas to nourish and convert into Tejas. But prana is the active component. So it's what we're working with. So we want to become more sensitive to it. First, we'll talk about Kachari Mudra. The actual practice of Kachari is a very advanced technique where the tongue moves all the way back up into the pharyngeal passage and extends up towards the top of the nose at the brow center, which actually requires a minor surgery of the frenum to be achieved. In Tantric Sexual Alchemy, the mudra we are using is actually known as Naba Mudra and involves bringing the tongue up to the roof of the mouth at the soft palate. Nabo comes from the word Naba, meaning sky. It is a mudra for directing our prana and psyche into the sky of the upper chakras. Naba Mudra is mentioned in the Garan Samhita and is an easy version of Kachari Mudra that anyone can practice. That being said, Naba Mudra gives many of the same benefits as Kachari, which can also still occur spontaneously when the Shakti ascends into the higher chakras. The full form of Kachari Mudra can still occur spontaneously as a spontaneous Kundalini Kriya. So Kachari Mudra achieves a controlling influence upon the glands of the endocrine system by stimulating and regulating the powerful hormonal secretions of the glands in the brain, the master gland, the pituitary, and the pineal. These hormonal secretions are produced in tiny amounts to directly influence the functions of the pituitary gland and then direct the whole orchestra of glands below Agya. The secondary glands below Agya are, for example, the thyroid, mammary, thymus, adrenal, and reproductive glands, as well as many other bodily processes and systems that rely on these hormones. Kachari Mudra has been found to influence the salivary gland and the faculty of taste, which are connected to the lower nerve plexuses involved in the regulation of hunger, thirst, and craving. In turn, this allows for some control over the sex drive. In the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the effects are described. The yogi who remains with the tongue going upwards for even half a second is freed from toxins, disease, death, old age. One who accomplishes this Kachari Mudra is neither troubled by diseases nor death, lassitude, sleep, hunger, thirst, or unconsciousness. Even in normal life, we've been promised by Swami Satyananda. He says, even in normal life, the continuous practice of the simple version, Naba Mudra, reduces the sensations of hunger, thirst, and craving. And by reducing hunger, thirst, and craving, these secondary complications are reduced. So much of the diseases and toxins that we absorb is from overeating, over drinking, and over craving. So Kachari and Naba Mudras are just one example of how mudras, when regularly practiced for some time, can affect the flow of prana, the psyche, as well as the physiology of the body and the brain. in turn allowing awareness and influence to parts of the human potential that we were previously out of reach of. And we discuss mudras more in the prana-vidya training. And we also go much into greater depth during integral kriya yoga. This brings us to Amrit, the nectar of immortality. To experience the nectar of immortality, Amrit, yogis practice Kachari Mudra. When full Kachari Mudra is accomplished, the tongue rests just beneath the location of the pituitary gland, stimulating the secretion of Amrit, and the yogi experiences the intoxicating bliss of spiritual union, oneness, going beyond the mind. In its full form, Kachari Mudra is an advanced yogic technique and involves this cutting of the frenum, which makes you look like a member of KISS. And however, it is not recommended to be done. It traditionally, in the Gurukula system, it would be done very slowly over time, a small slit here, a small slit there. And this would begin at a very early age. However, we are not going to do anything like that. We utilize the method of training the tongue to extend gradually over time by using Naba Mudra, in which the tongue is held against the soft palate. And over a period of time, the tongue becomes supple enough and begins to extend and can move into the pharynx. In this way, gradually over time, full Kachari Mudra does become possible. However, in general, this is a spontaneous Kundalini Kriya that occurs automatically, spontaneously when the Shakti moves upwards towards Agya and Bindu. And you may find when you're experiencing waves of bliss, the tongue, it does this automatically, and you're able to perform Kachari Mudra far better than when you practice during yoga, your yoga practice. When it happens spontaneously, it can be more full and easy. It happens easily. Yes.
When we do Naba Mudra, is the tongue flat up or is it curled? Is it the underside or the top of it?
It's going straight up. So it's kind of pointing towards the brow center. You can have it so that it's pointing towards the brow center, or you can move it further back. And when I start to feel intense waves of bliss, it goes further back. And the more intense that wave is, the further back it seems to go.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So we utilize Naba Mudra. Here are some quotes from some sacred scriptures. Kachari Mudra. When the yogi now curls his or her tongue upward and back, he is able to close the place where the three paths meet. What is the place where the three paths meet? Anybody?
Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna.
Very good. Excellent. The bending back of the tongue is Kachari Mudra and the closing of the three paths in Akash Chakra. The yogi who remains but half a minute in this position is free from illness, old age, and death. He who has mastered Kachari Mudra is not afflicted with disease, death, sloth, anger, thirst, and swooning. And we understand this more when we understand what happens when the bindu drops, when we lose the bindu. Because really what's happening here is we are redirecting the source, the existential cause, the bindu. We're redirecting that back upwards into the higher centers of the brain where it's conserved. So that's the whole basis of this idea of immortality. And both the Tantric and the Taoist concept of immortality have to do with conserving the bindu.